Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us for today's presentation. Say hi to ROI, 3 keys to creating a better sales culture. I'm Jamie, and I will be your host very briefly, really just to tell you housekeeping, and then I'll come back for the Q&A at the end. Just really briefly, housekeeping-wise, we will send a recording your way. So if you love this and you want to share it with all of your friends, we got you covered. Or if you need to leave, don't worry about it. We will send an email with this recording to you in about 24 hours after this presentation. Also, you're going to be muted throughout today's presentation, but please ask questions throughout. I will scoop those up and package them up. We've already gotten a lot of really good questions during the registration process, so thank you for that. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. So I'll kick it over to Brian, and then I'll leave.
Thank you, Jane. Really appreciate it.
Awesome.
The lovely intro there.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, everyone out there. Thrilled that you're joining us. We'll be doing a little webinar today. We're not going to run too long. We'll try to keep it on time. If you see me checking my phone, it's because Jamie's telling me to speed up or if you don't know me, if we haven't met yet, first of all, I'd love to meet you. Thanks for showing up. My name is Brian Trautschold. I'm the co-founder of Ambition. We're a sales management platform built for modern, data-driven, coaching-centric sales organizations. I'd love to connect with you on LinkedIn, Twitter, email, whatever. If you don't want to talk about sales and you want to talk about March Madness, with that too. But you probably didn't come for that. I don't care that much about my March Madness obsession today. What you hopefully care about is sales culture. And I'm guessing if you showed up here, you know that it's pretty important. There's a phenomenon going on right now, and I think this is happening in every company that we work with and the folks who come to us asking questions. And they're trying to create a modern, sometimes millennial-focused culture. And there's this buzzword, italicized, in our case, orange here, word that it's really easy to lose meaning. It's really easy to be like, oh yeah, of course we care about culture. But for us and our customers, we think it's a competitive advantage to have a winning sales culture, a coaching culture, and an organization that creates energy and engagement for your sales team. So we're going to talk about what building a winning sales culture looks like today on this call. Every conversation I have with a customer, I'm shocked how often I get into, how do you run your sales organization? What's the management cycle like? How does it work? And when we dig into that, they can tell me, a sales leader can tell me very clearly, well, here are the KPIs I have, here are the targets I have. But as we get into what that means for the rep, it typically ends at quota. And so I think one of the first pillars of a winning sales culture is clear, visible, transparent KPIs, benchmarks, goals, all the way down to your reps. And that means communicating them, making them visible, providing feedback on whether people are hitting them or not. That's pillar number one. Pillar number two, in my opinion, is coaching and using the data you have about what's happening versus those KPIs, those goals, those measurables, and giving people guidance on how to be better, how to improve. I think coaching is very, I think it's a commonplace word in most organizations. They say, yes, we do culture, or yes, we do coaching, but what are they actually doing? Is it repeatable? Is it actually affecting the reps is oftentimes a question mark. So you've got to work on that. And the third pillar, which obviously Ambition has been involved in over the last 5 years, is contests, sometimes gamification, sometimes called employee engagement. But it really provides the behavior lever for circles 1 and 2 with the KPIs and the coaching. So I want to talk about all 3 of these. I don't think any of these pillars stand on their own. We've worked with tons of organizations that have phenomenal, great coach as a leader or multiple coaches as team leads, but may not have the greatest culture because maybe another aspect's missing. We've worked with tons of people who have all the KPIs, who have all the spreadsheets in the world, know every little detail about their team, but they're not getting, maybe they're missing out on folks leaving, walking out the door because of attrition. Maybe they're not getting the development they hope for from their teams. maybe oftentimes you're not getting the results in the buy-in and engagement. So we're going to talk about all three, how they mix together, and we're going to try to get through it in a reasonable time frame today. Like Jamie said, please make sure that if you have a question, you put it into the Zoom. If we don't cover it today, we're happy to follow up and talk about it later. It doesn't have to be ambition-centric. We can just get into the weeds on your culture and areas that we can fix. I know that Jamie's got a few of them already that she's going to ping me about. I see the little orange thing on my side showing up. So like I said, we'll talk about how to set clear goals and clear KPIs that actually move the needle, that actually create buy-in and performance, metric-driven coaching techniques that really do increase the accountability and create a sustainable, consistent coaching program for performance. And last but not least, the side that gets people's blood flowing, that gets the energy going. Once again, pretty relevant right now because it's March Madness season. I'm sure everyone filled out their brackets. Everyone's talking about how their alma mater is going to beat someone else's. In sales, typically, we're pretty competitive animals. So, we'll talk about the contests, the competitions, the sales incentives that get people to behave the way that hopefully is aligned with your ultimate sales goals. So number one, this is hopefully a no-brainer, and I think that most great sales teams understand that the first part before we even get into the goals is you got to bring on great people and onboard them in a systematic way. You've got to teach them the skills they need from day one. But one of the first things I think after you've got your people, whether you hired them or someone else hired them, you may have inherited some folks, is you've got to get everyone on the team invested together on extremely clear, actionable KPIs and goals that you can communicate. And they come from typically the top down. We'll go over defining these, where they come from, how you end up at them, and what time frame you should be thinking about them. I often try to think as quick as a short-term pieces as possible, but this could be a longer term if you've got a more long-term sales cycle and the velocity is a little bit different. Traditionally, when you start with the clear goals, this is where the company target comes into play. And big organizations, I know some of you folks come from big enterprises, you say, well, that's way far out of our hands. It's drastically removed from where I sit leading an SDR team or an account management team or customer success team. That's okay. At some point in some part of the organization, my managers, my VPs, my directors on these calls, that someone's handing you a number that you're accountable to, and you need to break that into a clear, digestible target that your reps can go achieve and act on. So 3 steps to setting the right goals and KPIs. One is that first North Star goal. So in an organization like Ambition, that's the revenue goal. The SDR team has a sub goal. AE team has another goal. Enterprise has another goal. But everyone on the organization knows that we're going towards one North Star revenue goal, and then they each have their own directional goal that gets us there. So you've got to start there with your unit and start working backwards. We'll talk about this in a second, but I like to draw this out on the whiteboard. This is taking, use the AE example. If we're supposed to do $1 million of revenue, how many think about it starting with the revenue going up. How many deals do we need to win at our average size? To win that many, how many opportunities do we need to create per the typical conversion rate? And how many, hypothetically, meetings or demos do we need to set to create those opportunities at a typical conversion rate from meeting to op? So we're working backwards. Next, we define the activities that impact the conversion of those. So if I'm going to take those revenue, closed deals, opportunities, meetings, I need to set those KPIs correctly for my team. And I don't want to set a target or a series of metrics that they really can't control. So I need to give them some activation on how they're going to affect that ultimate flow. For us, it's about how many prospects are you talking to? Are you talking to the right prospects? When you have a meeting, what's the conversion rate versus your peers. All of these things are directly applicable to our team. They're not so abstract that they can't go affect them. And what we try to think about with our customer base and with the folks we work with is putting these metrics on in KPIs and goals on a scale that you can continually have recurring feedback. It shouldn't be set the KPI, forget about it, look at it at the end of the quarter, look at it worst case at the end of the year. Because if you're off, if you're not having the conversion rate you want, if you're not having the productivity you want, there's no room for course correction. And that really brings me to my next point, which is creating smart goals around that. You know, I'm not a big acronym guy. I like SMART goals. It makes sense. I can remember it. But there's also FAST if you want to do FAST. That's cool too. You can look up great research on both in HBR. But I'll walk you through what a SMART sales goal looks like. And think back to the example I was talking about with how we're providing those objectives and targets for our team. When you start with SMART, you want specific. So if you've got a team of AEs, maybe inside sales reps, 50 outbound dials per day. It's very specific metric, specific number. The M is measurable. You guys can read, but I'll walk through them. You know, you don't want something that there's no visibility into, that people can't wrap their heads around. So if you're using a CRM, hopefully you're maybe using a sales acceleration tool that makes this very easy. It could be Outreach, it could be DialSource, it could be a number of other great players in that market. But you want it to be very easy to measure those 50 specific outbound calls we're doing. Number 3 is you want it to be achievable. I think where we walk into some organizations, we see a number on the board that is clearly not going to be able to be achieved from step 1. So if I think about 50 outbound calls per day, that's well within the norm. We see numbers all across the board, but if you said 700 a day, I would think that's a little bit sketchy. Is it relevant? Sometimes this can be, a little bit of a gut call, but for inside salespeople today, SDRs, account executives, the phone is extremely relevant. You see the stat here, 41% of people say the phone is still the most effective sales tool. I would agree to that. I've gotten 7 cold calls today. I've talked to all 7 people because I have to answer, especially for you guys who do the local presence stuff. I feel like, oh my gosh, my parents have been in an accident. I got to answer these calls from Memphis. But it's relevant. And if they're willing to listen, if they're empathetic, if they're asking questions, I talk to them, especially if it's relevant. And lastly, time bound. So what this means is that, if I tell someone, hey, you need to make 50 outbound dials per day, but I don't give them 50 outbound dials, and I don't set any type of bound, that's not going to be very measurable. It's not going to be useful in a management conversation. So you want to put that bookend at the back end of it to lock it down and be able to evaluate from there. Pro tip, I've got these sprinkled into the presentation. Actually, Jamie did. But I feel strongly that all goals and KPIs, in terms of the type of them, are not equal. So we deal with a lot of folks who I get really excited when they do team-based KPIs and goals. And so you guys all have, I'm sure, reps, whatever the role, with a quota, with a target, and you've broken that down, hopefully, if you've paid attention at all, into some more bite-sized, achievable things you can measure. But it is really powerful when you start to roll out a system of team goals and team KPIs. Number 1 is you shift the mentality from, hey, what am I coming in to do versus what are we coming in to do? At the same side of that, when we're having our weekly team meeting or we're having our monthly team meeting, however you operate, hopefully you're putting some numbers on a board or you're using a system to manage folks that shows who's contributing what to these goals, who is adding to the pile of this KPI metric, because what's going to happen, whether you focus on it or not, is people are going to start looking at, hey, what did my neighbor in the next queue do? What did the guy across the hall who I'm competitive with, what are they contributing? And either how do I contribute more, or how do I not let my team down? And I think it's a very powerful human response to seeing that data. And it is extremely beneficial once you have that in front of everyone, so they can either say, I need to be better for my teammates, or I see that Abby's doing a great job. She's got way more demos than I do, or way more opportunity dollars than I do. How do I work more like her? So you're going to create some connective tissue in your organization that you may not have right now if you're just doing individual goals and KPIs. Next, we'll talk about coaching. So coaching is another one of those buzzwords right now. It's everywhere. We're a part of that. We're putting out tons of content around it. We think it's probably one of the most impactful levers you can pull to change the performance and the output of your organization. And if you're not doing any type of structured coaching, I think you're really leaving a lot on the table, and you're probably putting some of your reps at risk unnecessarily. So let's talk about how to roll that out. And I'm going to get to those best practices in a second. First of all, I've got some of these data points that I think are going to blow your mind in terms of why are we not doing this today. The first one is the average ROI is typically 50 times the investment of sales coaching programs, which is incredible. This is from a source which I kind of wanted to Google before we got into this, International Coach Federation, but I'm going to believe it because I know these guys. According to Brainshark, companies with dynamic sales coaching programs achieve higher win rates to the tune of 28%. And they also report it's not just that you're leaving potential gains on the table if you're not hitting the mark with coaching. 60% of salespeople who are more likely to leave a job because of their manager is a poor coach. And we've all heard the cliche of that. Employees don't leave the company, they leave the manager. Some people, I'm sure, are going to roll your eyes at that. I think that's really true. And in a hyper unemployment world where we are today, where if anyone's got a good situation, if they've got a good manager, they'll work through that even if the numbers maybe aren't there for them, even if they're not crushing the quota at this point, because they believe that person's going to get them there. I think that's something that you as a sales leader can use to your advantage to not only bring people in and have new people reference what your folks on the floor are already saying about you, but keeping people in seat longer versus bouncing to a new role. Also, you're 95% more likely to complete any goal when there's a specific accountability appointment or check-in at the completion of that goal. I talk about this a lot on demos and on calls with our customer base. I always talk about my fitness goals or my weight goals. You know, if my wife and I are hanging out and I say, you know, hey, it's summer coming up, I want to lose 10 pounds, and I don't do any of those smart things, I don't have any type of time where I say, hey, by May 1, it's really unlikely that I'm going to achieve that, especially if I'm not doing any type of intermittent feedback along the way. That's very obvious. I think we all know that inherently. The reality is most organizations hear it and it goes one out the other year. We don't actually do anything about it. All right, so what great coaches do not do. And this one is probably my biggest talking point over the last 2 or 3 years, is to only do annual or biannual reviews on performance. If you're only talking about where people are to quota attainment, where they are to their objectives and deliverables as a rep once or twice a year, you're not going to get the type of improvement you need. You need to have a highly proactive, iterative feedback cycle, and you need to be continually looking at what are the things that affect a person getting to that level. I'm sure most of you guys are, but I'm afraid people are doing the next one, which is the water cooler coaching. I don't know if I made that up. I don't think so. I really like the term, though, because I've been at 2 big enterprise organizations where the de facto coaching session was, hey, Brian, do you have 10 minutes? Let's go walk to get coffee, or let's walk over to wherever together. We'll spend 10 minutes talking about this week or this month's performance, and we'll do it again in 2 weeks or a week or whatever. A lot of people think that's great. It's casual. It's easy to talk to your manager. You're walking. The reality is, though, it's not structured. You're not talking about a consistent set of points. You're not into the data. And lastly, most of the time, and I hate this, you forget. If you got 10, 12, 8 reports, whatever the case may be, you can't keep up with all the different challenges they're having on the fly in an unstructured conversation. So the first 5 minutes are going to be re-updating what happened last time, what did we talk about, and then you're going to talk for 5-10 minutes about a couple random casual things, and that's going to happen to get in 2 or 4 weeks. So get out of the water cooler coaching, get systematic. We'll talk about that in a second. And last but not least, data silos. I've been in an organization that was probably one of the worst cases of this, where the rep, myself, I had no visibility into the data. This was as a rep and a team lead. I didn't get to see the data about what me, the rep, was doing until the team coaching call at the end of the month. And I didn't get to see data on my reps when I was a team lead, except for bi-monthly. So every 2 weeks I get a report with a bunch of different metrics. I'd look at it. If there was anyone grossly off track, I would talk to them. But I wasn't getting continual feedback, which meant they weren't getting continual feedback. And it also gave the reps a big disadvantage because I can self-course correct, and your reps can self-course correct. If they see that they're off to target, if they're not going to, if they're not putting in the calls, if they're not setting demos at the right rate, give that to them as quickly and as real time as possible, because they'll change their behavior. If they don't know they have a problem, they're probably not going to change anything. So to talk about what great coaches are doing, I think the best coaches I've had, the best coaches we work with, are incredibly consistent. So they're creating a one-on-one coaching, team-based coaching program that should be, very similar, very consistent in format, creates a recurring basis of communication, constant feedback, and people shouldn't be surprised ever when you go into it and they say, well, I wasn't prepared for that question. I don't know the answer to what I'm struggling with. They should know what's coming. They should have an answer. That gets you right into the meat of the conversation. You should always be using data, hopefully beforehand, whether you're using a tool like Ambition, whether you're using spreadsheets, whether you're using Salesforce, whatever, whether you got a whiteboard in the corner of the office, whatever it is, before you go have that coaching one-on-one, you should know the key points, the key metrics, where they are versus the goals that have been set, hopefully where they stand versus their peers. So, am I having a off-track, off-peer, everything's bad conversation, or I have, this person's off track, but they're in line with everyone else, so I've got a bigger problem than just with Brian. Being prepared is key. This is another reason for the taking notes, having a section in your one-on-one program to say, we talked about this last time, I want to hear about this next time. It kills me as a busy manager, and I'm sure everyone in here doesn't have nearly enough hours in the day, when you have those first 5 minutes that are all just catch up. What did we talk about last time? Oh yeah, I remember. If you can take the notes from your last session or have an action item that's saved somewhere, like in a tool, and you can say, oh yeah, we talked about this. What happened? I've already read all your notes for this week. I see that you're struggling with this. We're going to talk about it in a second. I see that you want to sign up for this training. I already sent a note to sales enablement to get you into it. I see you want to do a ride along with one of the enterprise reps next month. I already pinged them. You're prepared, so you can have the maximum value conversation in the 10 to 20 to 60 minutes you have with a rep. 60 minutes is probably unlikely, but hopefully you've knocked all that out on the front end, so you're having conversation, not tell me what you did, tell me what I already asked you. And as I mentioned there, setting and recording those action items so that you can hold someone accountable. Remember that 95% completion of goals that have a time limit. A lot of times these action items become invisible, and like you'll send an email from one person to another. Hey, you told me today you're going to do this in a week. Now the email's gone. You're both drowned in that inbox. You need a way, whether it's in a calendar invite, whether it's in a tool, to say, did you do this? You told me you were going to try to set 8 demos next week. Did you do it? Did you get this decision maker to move from commit to procurement and legal? Did you get this person to connect you with this referral that you asked them for? Having those things that you can go in and you're reminded, and they know that you're going to ask, so they can be accountable to it. And another one of these pro tips, I like to think we're trying to automate as much of this as we can. You guys have a litany of tools at your fingertips right now, and that can be overwhelming. But I think in terms of what I'm really referencing here is the sales acceleration space and some of this coaching management software, like where we play in. The more of this that can be done manually, the better. I talked to a manager just the other day, and I think he referenced that he was doing 3 or 4 hours per week of data data aggregation for all of these rep conversations. So if you go that, out to a month, that's 12 hours. A fourth of his, 12 hours already is just sucked into manipulating spreadsheets. And some people can do a great job. I'm a Google Sheets nerd. I try to stay away from Excel now that I'm a little bit more startup-y and modern, but I can do cool stuff. I can get as much format as possible. But if I'm going to Salesforce, dumping a report, download the report, get it into Excel, manipulate that for the rep, have a rep looking at a spreadsheet, which is, I don't think, the most exciting thing. I would rather do that a little bit different way. So whether you're doing it from the coaching or the reporting side and automating that for a maximum visibility, or definitely in terms of getting these tasks and these reminders in a situation where you don't have to go run through the list on the legal pad on the side of your desk, or you don't have to go drop a note in someone's inbox that, hey, by the way, I still want to hear about this. The more of that you can automate, the better. And the point of this is that the coaching is going to increase the accountability and the consistency. We know that. That's the obvious part. Excuse me, didn't mean to go backwards there. The last part that I think is really important is the incentives. And so you've gotten, we've talked through the KPI side. I think everyone is on board at this point with, you've got to be doing coaching. I think there's some clear ways to do it better. The last part where I think organizations are really waking up to is the engagement, the incentive, the culture of recognition side that really brings it all together and pulls the lever on people getting excited and really buying into all the other things. What are the goals that we're going to hit? What are the deliverables and action items I need to go do? Getting competitive, getting some a little bit more energy into that is, I think, something that is clearly proven to work. The problem is what we're going to talk about here for a second. Most companies run incentives, they run contests the exact same way they did 10 years, 20 years, 30 years ago. They say the best person in the org at this metric gets this, the next best person gets this, and that's it. The problem is that only 10 to 25% of your org are ever going to appear on a leaderboard. Few are actually going to win a contest. So whenever you do that, you're tuning a bunch of people out, and you're losing the engagement of people you actually critically need to get excited. We have some great content around moving the middle on our site. Love for you guys to check that out. We'll try to send it to everyone who registered for this webinar. Another thing is the incentives you give out. I think our VP of sales said it best here. Amazon gift cards are the incentives of yesteryear. Same with Starbucks gift card, all of that kind of stuff. It's like me giving my nephew $10. Does he care? Not really. Does he say thanks? Sure. We've taken this, I think, maybe to the extreme fun level, but I think it's a little inspiration for what you can do. You don't want to be basic, as the kids say these days. You want to have fun. You actually want to get people motivated. As I said, Mark McWaters, great leader at Ambition. We kicked off this billboard campaign 2 years ago. So Q3, we have an incentive, and everyone who's won that incentive gets to do their own custom billboard with whatever they want on it, wherever they want it. And you'd be surprised it's actually not that much money, because billboards are maybe not the main medium for advertising these days. But this is downtown Nashville. Mark had his own billboard. He did his own Photoshop for his UT Vols, during football season, which didn't end up great for him. But you can see how much he was into it, and this blew up on LinkedIn. People loved it. I hope I see a bunch more of these around the country. But whatever it is, we've had people who do very custom Masters tournaments where they give away a green jacket. We've heard about people who give away trips and experiences. I think that's key for young people. Today, it's not just about the dollars or the bling excitement of the reward or the incentive. It's about what does it mean to them. It's about the experience. In a lot of cases, about the visibility and recognition up through the org. Did the CEO hear about this? Did the CRO hear about this? And so that's a really powerful thing that you can leverage. Try to keep moving here quickly. Another thing is what do people desperately want that they don't really need and they would never ever buy. And I think, President's Club has done this in the past. The clubs are always fun where it's like, let me take a person and their spouse or significant other, and we'll go somewhere. Probably wouldn't have done it for themselves, but they get to go with, maybe the VP of sales, some of their top performers, and have an all-inclusive type weekend. Similar things are trips, and we've done trips to Napa. We've done just plane tickets, go wherever you want, take a 3-day weekend. I think all that kind of stuff is extremely powerful with today's generations. And if you look back on some of the incentives that I was a part of at other companies, a lot of times people were spending a lot more money, and it was, just in compensation or just in dollars, that people were a lot less excited about than two $500 flight vouchers or similar type thing, which, billboard, which is not that much more expensive than that, which people got extremely into. Also on contests, you've got to make it visible. The fastest way to get people mentally bought into your contest, mentally bought into the incentives you're running, is to show up and to put them where people can see them. There were a lot of contests in both of my previous companies, and with a lot of folks that we've talked to, the only people who see the results are sales analysts or maybe a manager somewhere, and they're having to go compile that data, run through it, check it, and then they send it out weekly, or worst case, they send it out monthly. I worked at a place about 10 years ago. I'm not going to throw them under the bus right now, but they printed out these enormous poster boards and they put them on the wall, but they only updated them every 2 weeks, probably because it was pretty inconvenient to do that. But it had about 500 names, everyone in the sales org, and they would go paste it up in these off sales centers around the country. But that's 2 weeks ago. You could have told me in 10 minutes that, hey, Brian, you're 15th place. These are the people ahead of you. Here are the numbers that they have. If you want to win, you really need to pick it up. Same concept here. You got to get this stuff out and get it visible and as real time as possible, because that's going to actually trigger people to change behavior versus hearing, oh yeah, you lost, you got way behind 2 weeks ago. You can't pick it up now. You can't catch up. So a couple words of wisdom from one of my good friends, Laura Bailey. And I'll go direct quote here. I don't want to butcher it. As managers, our job is to celebrate the early small wins and the big failures of our team. Callbacks, yeah. Conversations, yeah. Hangups, definitely, yeah. This is the key to building flexibility, fun, openness, and authenticity. And what she means here, while I think this quote's important, is it goes back to not all goals and KPIs are created equally. If you want a great culture, it's not just about who's winning. It's about who's working hard. It's about who's getting better. And if you've got new SDRs, if you've got new inside sales reps, if you're in a new market or you're changing your product packaging and delivery or going into a new segment, it's hard, especially SDR leaders out there. We're doing the same thing, building an org internally. We think we're going to make it world-class, but it's going to be all about celebrating things that aren't just, hey, so-and-so set the best demo we've ever had, or they create a great new opportunity. We've got to be, as leaders, really cognizant that a lot of times they're getting a harsh conversation. They may have someone say, I don't want to talk to you right now. Or they may have someone say, I wish you hadn't called me. Whatever it is, you've got to celebrate those little things, because that's what's going to build the culture of recognition. It's going to build a safety net for people to learn, to fail, to be creative. And I think a lot of folks are only thinking, how do I put the big goals on the board? How do I put the revenue leaders on the leaderboard? And it's important to do more than that. I think Laura Bailey has a phenomenal point there that we wanted to share. Another thing really quickly, and we're very close to the end here, we'll get to questions, is balance the playing field. If you've got a hybrid org, if you've got people in different roles, if you've got top performers who are drastically outweighing the people in the middle, try to figure out ways to do holistic scoring. And it's not to bring the top people down. It's not to make them feel worse. But if you take 2, 3, 4 metrics that are key to having a successful sales year, to key to hitting quota, or key to being a great rep at your company, you can create a hybrid score. We do this something called the ambition score. We do it on activities and objectives. Other people do it a myriad of ways. I think it's all good. I think what it creates is the QBR that everyone can look at and say, hey, maybe Brian's not throwing a lot of touchdowns right now, but he's getting a lot of first downs. He's getting a lot of big yardage. Great. That's going to set him up for the future. And when you normalize that, it's going to get more people engaged into what's happening, and they're going to focus on those key metrics more because you're scoring a variety of them versus just quota attainment or revenue. So I think those are the three components to sales, a winning sales culture. I went a little bit further than I wanted to, a little bit longer. I get excited about this stuff. Also have my dog in here. She's making noise. She's annoyed that we're still in this room. So I'm going to open it up for questions. If you screenshot anything on the day, this is the spot you want to look. I think these are phenomenally nice tidbits to take away. But I'm going to open up for questions. Excuse me. I'm going to check my Zoom app really quick, see if I've got any coming in from Jamie, and I really appreciate you guys showing up. Yeah, here I'm back on the video.
Hey, I want to see that dog.
I'll show you Millie's getting frustrated while we're waiting here. Anything
Yeah, so we actually got quite a few that came in. So let me get my notes up here. So that was great. A lot of really nice tactical information. If you go to that last slide, Brian, if you do have questions, if we don't get to your question right now, you can email us at growth@ambition.com. And yeah, that's great. So first question came in from Adam, and I think you kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think he wants to take it a step deeper. If there's no access to metrics and no clear path to measure performance other than end results, where should coaching begin? So how do you even start if you have no idea what the measurements are?
That's a phenomenal question from Adam, because unfortunately that's the reality for a lot of folks that don't have access to, in their environment today, they may not have visibility to that data. I've seen a lot of folks who are really good at going directly to the reps and being aspirational and saying, what do you want to achieve? What is your goal? How does that relate to the company goal? And making sure those are both recorded somewhere. So, certainly I would assume in the organization there's some type of ability to say this person's sold X, or they're at X revenue, or they've done X metric, or done X meeting set, whatever their key deliverable is as a salesperson or an SDR. But no matter what, if you want to get people bought into the process, if you want to get people bought into improving, I think you've got to hone in on what do they want. Do they want to be the best SDR at your company ever, or do they want to become SDR, team lead, and go to CS? And so if I'm trying to create that coaching culture and the first part of a great culture overall, I'm going to hone in on where do my people want to be, and how do me as the manager, how do I enable them or unlock some of the doors that they want to get to? So I'm trying to talk to them as much as possible. I would really push the organization to open up some of those KPIs. I think that you can make a compelling case to the company that transparency, visibility, it's going to, one, create accountability. Two, it's going to create a sense of buy-in. It's like me looking at my Apple Watch. Like, I want to see how many steps I have. No one's even managing. My wife doesn't even check it. I do it myself. So, I think that there's a compelling case to do that. But worst case scenario, you start with them. You start with where they want to be in 6 months, 12 months, 2 years, and you try to unlock those doors for them, and they will buy in 200% to what you do as a manager. That's a great question, Adam.
Yeah, that's great. And I think too, you and I recently were in San Diego talking to people, and I would see their eyes light up when we would talk about our coaching platform, mainly because they would go, oh, this is a way that I can actually quantify the success of those things that aren't as, like tracking calls and activities is really concrete, and a lot of people get that, but the coaching sort of action plans and, having those conversations, it's like, oh, this is the way to actually sort of add a value to those things that aren't quite as easy to track. So I think that's a great point. Next question, I think this kind of pairs nicely. Lorraine wants to know just some examples of KPIs that she needs to be tracking. It sounds like she's an SDR leader, but specifically, those teams tend to maybe need, very clear KPIs as, more than anyone. So what are some of those metrics to track? Yeah,
Lorraine, thanks so much. I see most folks who are building, and like I said, we in the midst of this, so it's top of mind for me, and they're only talking about how many opportunity dollars they want SDR to create. They're thinking of it as a channel, which is great. They're saying, I've got folks coming in from marketing, I've got folks coming in from maybe my content. I need to have this equal return on investment from my SDR group. Great. So you've got a number in your mind. Maybe it's they need to create $1 million in pipeline annually, whatever the case may be. So you got to start backdooring it from there. And you say things like, well, how many opportunities is $1 million in pipeline? Maybe it's 10, maybe it's 1,000. Could be whatever, depending on your ASP. So then you back into, well, if we have, let's just say 100 opportunities we need to create to hit that million, well, how many conversations historically, if you have this data, great. If you don't, you got to do some hard back of the envelope guessing. But I think most people can back into it in their org. But you say, how many conversations do I need to convert to that 100 opportunities? And you start to break it all the way down to, well, here's how many calls I need to make, because on average in our organization, or maybe in yours, people actually start a conversation 5%, 7%, sometimes 2%. Depends who you're calling. Depends on the persona that you're marketing to. So you've got to figure that out. Hopefully you have some data, but if not, set something reasonable. Do the whole SMART thing. Do something that's achievable, and then really quickly iterate. So if you've got nothing and you're starting from scratch, set a reasonable amount, 40, 50, 60 calls, and start to calculate, well, people are answering 5% of the time. That means I need to bump that up if I want to convert those 5 conversations or 3 conversations a day into 2 meetings set. And if I've got 2 meetings set and I'm converting those at 50% or 20%, you can tweak those levers. And I think that's the thing that's great about sales development, Lorraine, is that you can do it really fast. You've got high octane inputs. You've got a high velocity of figuring out what's working, what's not working. So I wouldn't wait a month, or definitely not a quarter, to say, oh, we were way off. I would do week, maybe 2-week sprints, and I would change one variable every time. I wouldn't be changing the script and the persona and whatever else each week. I do one, and I think in something like 4 to 6 weeks, you should have some clear information on, are we doing enough? Are we not doing enough? Is the problem with demo to opportunity conversion? How do we tweak that? And you can go from there. So typically what we see is somewhere between 30 and 75 calls at the top end. And we see a variety of other activity metrics that could be dependent on market. LinkedIn messaging, LinkedIn Connect, email definitely. Referrals is big now. I totally believe in referrals. So those are some of the activity metrics. And then you want to track the downstream conversion of those things. Yeah. I think you can recognize and high-five people on all of that stuff. People are going to have their own little magic secret sauce once they figure it out. They're really good at LinkedIn. Like, lean into what they're good at, as long as they're hitting, that output level you want. That's okay.
I think that's a great point. And then also, I know something that we did recently here, just chatting with one of our salespeople and kind of learning a little bit more about their process, is that we took emails as an activity function and broke it into automated emails and sort of outbound emails and inbound emails, because all of those sort of are weighted differently. So it's like, obviously the ones that you put a little bit more effort into are probably going to be more powerful than the ones in your cadences. So I think that's all really good stuff. Okay, so you mentioned calls, and we're kind of, I think, in that same thread. Franklin has a good question. Franklin is using Gong for call coaching, so that's a platform that helps you do that. And so he says, when you talk about coaching, it sounds like weekly one-on-ones. Are you saying I should be doing both? So call coaching, which is what Gong helps him do, and then the coaching you're talking about. Can you kind of elaborate on how those work together, or if they should work together?
Yeah, really quickly, Franklin, the answer is yes. I'm talking about 2 different things, and I'm definitely saying you should do both. So I think of the Gong folks we love. that is measuring my conversation effectiveness and my conversation stats, which is incredibly important. I wish that I had that 10 years ago as a rep, because if you've been on this webinar this whole time for 47 minutes, you realize I talk way too much, sometimes way too fast, and I'm not asking questions of my audience. And I do the same thing on demos. So what a tool like Gong and some of the other folks who we are big fans of in that space is they're going to help you do that. They're going to give you real insight into, at a rep-to-rep level, what's Brian doing, what he could be doing better, and how folks in the organization who may be more successful are running and quarterbacking their calls. So that's great. That's, to me, a very high-octane enablement tool that can get you more effective. What I think you need to couple that with is a recurring one-on-one between the manager. A lot of that data from Gong is going direct. They're doing the analysis. It's really cool. Managers can obviously listen in. They can provide notes and tidbits, but the only thing that reps are doing is not just calls. They're doing a bunch of other stuff. They have aspirations. They have development goals they want to hit. They have a variety of metrics that are probably off the phone. How do their meetings trend downstream? Do they become ops? Do they become winners? Do they become headaches? Did they have the right perception of the product when they got 4 or 5 stages down? A lot of that's set, hypothetically at the SDR, ISR level. So, yeah, absolutely. I think the Gong type stuff, call coaching, is incredibly important. But it's a key. It's one of the aspects of this whole coaching mentality that goes into looking at the metrics weekly, looking at the challenges, talking about what this person wants to be doing in 6 months and how they can enable themselves, and you can enable them as a leader to get there. And so by all means, I guess to answer your question, yes, I'd be doing both. I would try to, we do this with people who use Gong or Exec Vision or Chorus today, get data from that tool into Ambition, which is something we'd love to do. Clear representation of how a person is progressing and achieving. And I would by all means do both if you can.
Yep. And same thing, with the email systems like Outreach and those, you can take all that data and put it in Ambition too.
Yeah,
well,
yeah. You want to look at the conversation. Like, you want to see how many emails are getting a reply. Tools like that are so great. And you want to bring that into a coaching conversation, and you as a manager can then connect the dots and say, wow, Jamie has the highest conversion of a call to accepting a next meeting. Hannah has this email reply rate. You can start to see those things. Yeah. And as you look at them in Ambition or another tool, you can disseminate that information and best practices out to your team.
Yeah, I love that. And that's a great note to end on. Building culture isn't just about the one-on-ones and making sure individual performance is tip-top. It truly is, how can we all learn from each other? How can, like you said, create that visibility on the floor with, team competitions and KPIs that everyone shares, so that we all get smarter together and learn from each other. So I love it. Well, thank you, Brian. Thank you guys for joining us. Like I said, we'll send, hold on. Oh, we got one more question. We got one more question. I think it's good. I think it's really good. This is Adam. Again, maybe the same Adam. If you could only focus on one conversation rate in your process, what would it be and why? Oh, sorry, conversion rate, not conversation rate. Conversion rate.
That's a tough one. I think there, in any organization, there'd be a few of them, but I think it's pretty hard. I'm going backwards here, Adam. I think it's pretty hard to rapidly change win rate. I think win rate is difficult to adjust quickly. I think that also at the other end, like, the rate of activity to conversation is pretty tough. So I would focus somewhere around, what's our conversion from a conversation we're having to a positive disposition. And so I think that's an area where you can train a lot on. That could be you and I get on a call before a demo, at a demo. How good am I, the rep, at getting you to a next step into the sales process where I can guide you along? That's what I would probably focus my time on, because I think there's a lot of a lot of different ways to do that, whether that's a coaching methodology like a customer-centric selling or a challenger or one of those type things, or whether it's just being a little bit more educated and aware of your product and the other differentiators in the market, as well as, listening more, asking better questions, making sure as we're talking, I am reiterating why you were qualified, or why maybe you're, ideally why you're qualified, or why you should move forward with us. So that conversion rate from we're talking, I think you're qualified, to getting you to take the next scheduled positive step in our sales process is probably where I would spend my time. That's a great question.
Awesome. All right. So now it's the end. So if you have any other questions, reach out to us. We would love to help in any way. It doesn't have to be about our product specifically. We just like talking to people. So growth@ambition.com. You can email us, and have a good day, guys.
Thanks, Jamie. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.